We got a cage match for you on Dream Masters, and I'm hoping you guys like it. It's kind of one that a lot of people wanted to see, a dream match like this, and we're gonna finally get an answer. And here's the cage, as we got Bruno and the immortal Hulk Hogan in a cage for the first and only time it'll ever happen. And this should be interesting, as Bruno goes to work on the Immortal One. If you guys don't know, Bruno Samartino is one of the longest running world champions in the history of the WWF. And of course, if you're from the 80s or the 90s, you know that Hulk Hogan was the kind of champion that wouldn't go away in the 80s after he defeated the Iron Sheik in the Madison Square Garden for it. Of course, Sheik won it from Bob Backlund, and Hogan beat Sheik for it in Madison Square Garden, which started the beginning of what was known as Hulkamania. Bruno Samartino was a wrestler. In his day, there was no real factions. Well, there was factions probably, but there wasn't really any, any kind of a movement as far as what you called your fan base. But Bruno, don't make any mistake about it, Bruno had his fan base, and a lot of people loved Bruno Samartino, one of the most beloved wrestlers of all time, even up to current day. And a lot of people who are wrestling enthusiasts will say that Bruno, between the two, was the better champion, including Bruno himself would say often, many times before, that he was the better champion over Hogan. Of course, Hogan, being Hogan, he wouldn't really remit to any of that, nor would he acknowledge any of that, as Samartino sent to the corner by the Immortal One. Touch with a clothesline in the corner. A lot of the time you wouldn't really see Hogan, Hogan, a lot of people will ask me, why don't I like Hulk Hogan? Was I a Hulkamaniac, or was I a Warrior fan? And the answer would be no, I wasn't either. I wasn't a Hogan fan, and I wasn't a Warrior fan in the 80s. I was more of a fan of guys who, could move around the ring, and also guys who had promos, if you would, or to the talking in the ring, guys who I could identify with. That's kind of who I was drawn to. Guys who I thought were, talented in the ring as well. I mean, even at a young age, I knew what talent was. Like, I could tell you that Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was probably one of the most talented and most underappreciated guys. Oh my! As Bruno just threw Hogan out of the cage. Yeah, that didn't happen back in Bruno's days, but nowadays they will, I guess. And Bruno sends Hogan's face into the side of the cage then. There's a right hand there by Hogan and elbow. They're both duking out on the outside of the cage now. But I mean, I was a fan of guys like Ricky Steamboat, Macho Man, and those guys could, put on matches 30, 40 minutes long. And this is going back to the old days when a side headlock would sit on there for a few times during a match, which a lot of wrestling fans today really wouldn't appreciate much, as, they would consider that, quote, boring, in which I would refer and tell them, if they don't like it, stay home. I like a match that actually can go in a very evenly matched, confrontation. But, the sad part is even at a young age, I knew kind of, whenever you have to go up against guys like a Hulk Hogan or Warrior, you're going to take the fall for them no matter what. And I always found it interesting as a kid why Hogan would face guys like, Big Boss Man, who, don't get me wrong, Boss Man, a lot of the big guys were very, very talented guys. In all honesty, if it wasn't for those big guys like Boss Man, Earthquake, or Andre the Giant especially, King Kong Bundy, all those big guys, it wasn't for any of those guys, Hogan wouldn't be as big as he is now, because the whole purpose of them even being there is to make him look better than he actually is. Which is why, what I come to learn later in life, which was called the Hogan Initiative, when they went out and they got all these big guys out back in the 80s for Hogan to mow down, so to speak. But, I mean, I always wanted to see what would happen if he defended the title against maybe, I don't know, Jake Roberts, Ricky Steamboat, Ravishing Rick Rude. I think he wrestled him maybe once, maybe, if he's lucky. There's so many talented guys that weren't, like, quote, heavyweights, but, Could you imagine what would happen if Ricky Steamboat and Hogan locked it up? I don't really know what that would be, really. I couldn't even imagine what that would be. Ricky Steamboat could wrestle a tin can and make it look good. Macho Man Randy Savage is another talented guy. Now, granted, he did get a title shot, and he did have a title run. Not as long and as impressive as Hogan's, but Macho Man Randy Savage was one of the innovators of flying, really. Granted, there was the Superfly Jimmy Snuka who made, jumping off the high-end places famous, but if it wasn't for guys like the Macho Man developing like the double axe sledge from the top to the outside or the flying elbow, you really wouldn't have much of anything now either for high-profile matches and high-impact maneuvers like that. In all honesty, if it wasn't for guys like the flying elbow, like the Macho Man, you wouldn't probably have like the shooting star presses and all that other stuff that you have today for the guys who like the high-flying stuff. Or, like the wrestling fans say, like to call the flippy shit. Quote, unquote. Pardon the language. As Hogan and Bruno are taking it to each other one-on-one, yeah? Right hands and left hands on the outside of the rings. Fans here in this outside arena here are liking it. As Bruno is giving it right back to Hogan. And Hogan returns the favor. And here comes Hogan around again. Another right hand for Bruno. Headbutt. Hogan slams. Goes to throw Bruno, who kind of collapses there. I mean, pound for pound, Hogan's probably the larger of the two between Bruno. Do I think he's got the shape of Bruno? Not really. I think Bruno is very, very, in the ring, he probably had the best conditioning because Bruno would work out like a beast. Uh-oh, look at this. Pin attempt. And that's going to be the end of it right there, folks. That was basically rolled him up there. You see some of this from earlier. There's a back suplex by Bruno to the Hogan. And like a real champion, goes right for a pin right away. Granted, Hogan, kicked out there. Then you see a bear hug by Bruno, and Bruno's also known for his strength, too. Just as strong as he was talented in the ring, he could grapple with the best of them. He could brawl with the best of them, too. Bruno was involved with some of the most bloodiest cage matches ever. But in the end, you see this right here. Hustles Hogan into the ring and then pins him right there, and there's your winner. And good for him, as Bruno kind of gets the win on this one. So let me ask you fans this now. Is that surprising to you guys? Do you think Hogan could have beaten Bruno? I don't know. What I am glad to know is that is the only Hogan match we can show you tonight. That makes me kind of happy, I'm not going to lie. But it's not the first of many. I'm sure we're going to have him back again and see who else can take him on or whatnot. All right, folks, when we get back, we're going to get another epic confrontation of yesterday versus today. But this time, tag team action. Stick around.